to order cheese shop in Syracuse, New York. We are in our third year of business now, so not that far off from what it sounds like many of you are at that stage. And we really had to build our shop from the ground up. Being in New York, most people think that I've got this like crazy accessibility because I'm like so close to the city, but it's sort of all a farce. The city area kind of stays to the city area and doesn't really branch out beyond where we are. And so we really had to work to create any sort of distribution platform, get cheese to our area, and figure out how to build that network. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. If at any point anyone has any questions, please let me know. I'm here to help answer questions and chat about it, and we could discuss how we sort of made it work in our area. So to get started, I was just going to talk a little bit about like what I did when we got started, if that sounds good with everyone. Great. So when I first was starting to open the Curd Nerd, it took me about a year of discussing. I had previously worked in New York City area in Brooklyn at a cheese shop. And so I took a lot of the like people I was buying from, a lot of the distributors we were working with down there, and started sending out contact emails that were basically just like, hey, I'm opening a cheese shop in Syracuse. What does distro look like for me? Which I was met with a lot of like, there's none, there's no opportunity for cheese in your area. Good luck, find someone else. Or we could drop ship you cheese. It will cost you $500 a UPS box. Good luck. And I was like, great, none of that works for me to open a shop in a like lower middle class area and still make cheese at any sort of an affordable price point. So what I started to do was I quite literally got in my car and I went around to all of the makers I could reasonably drive to in the Syracuse and beyond area. And I just reached out to them and was like, who are you selling cheese to? And took all of the lists of everyone. And then I sent emails to all the makers I really liked and was like, who are you selling cheese to? Who are the distributors you work with? Where's your where are your warehouses? Like, what are we talking about here? Trying to decide if my like only reasonable opportunity for cheese was going to be to drive down every couple weeks to the city to pick up pallets, and what that would even look like. Because at the time I was driving a like old small Chrysler that was like a hand-me-down of a hand-me-down. And I was like, there's no way a pallet of cheese fits in the back of that car, but we'll figure it out if we have to, I guess. And by doing that, by creating all of those like conversations and starting to have those conversations, I was able to find distributors I did not know about in my area that maybe were not cheese specific, but definitely had a small cheese catalog. And what that allowed me to do was create and start relationships and build my case up from really small levels of offerings to what I have now, which we carry about 100 cheeses at a time in my shop, which is pretty cool. But to start, we really just found those smaller distributors. So in our area, there's a teeny tiny little truck that's owned by one guy. He's got he has one warehouse employee and one driver employee and him. And they're the three employees of this distributor. And they are like micro. They only carry like New York cheese and a couple other items. And I would not have found, like, you cannot Google to find this kind of distributor. There was no accessibility to this information anywhere that I could find in a normal platform. It really took me reaching out to all those cheesemakers who were more than happy to tell me how to buy their cheese. And what that did was create accessibility to know who these distributors were. From there, I started buying from them for about 6 months with regularity and making sure that I was paying within their term limits, which was super important because what that allowed me to do was at the end of those 6 months, go back to those distributors and be like, hey, love working with you. Clearly it's going great. I know you're now picking up from X, Y, and Z makers, or I know you're picking up at X warehouse to get these products. If I were to arrange other cheese to be available at that warehouse, would you also think about distributing that? And what that did was almost triple my offerings pretty quickly because more often than not, distributors and people who are already making those runs are willing to increase their catalog size if they know that they have guaranteed sales from it. So to give you a direct example of this, in we spent about a year buying cheese from Essex Street Cheese Company, which is a small importer. They only work with about 9 cheeses from Tamales Bay out of the West Coast. So the cheese would come into New York, go to California, and then fly back to New York via plane, which is honestly the stupidest way to get cheese I could ever possibly imagine. But after about a year of doing that and working with a small distributor called Regional Access right out of our area, I figured out that they must have been going to somewhere in New York or New Jersey to pick up their cheeses that they were getting because they were working with some of the larger distributors like Forever Cheese. So I asked them I was like, what warehouses are you guys stopping at? And then I messaged Essex Street Cheese, Jewel over there directly and said, what warehouses do you guys stock at? And was able to sort of fill in that connection point. So I introduced the buying rep that I was talking to at Regional Access to Jewel. And within about 2 months, they were able to create a way to get their cheese to the same warehouse that Regional was picking up from, which not only like dropped my price per pound by about $10 per pound, but it also allowed me to create a better working relationship with a distributor I was already working with. I was buying from Regional Access on a regular basis. I was having conversations with them all the time. And now we've created such a strong relationship. They're always willing to help me out whenever I have an opportunity for other cheese that I want, or I'm looking for them to expand their catalog. They kind of trust that I've created a like good buying relationship with them. So while it is sort of a lot of time and effort, creating those like relationships with your reps at distribution points, I think is one of the most invaluable pieces of work a cheese buyer could do in any real capacity. Having someone that's like willing to tell you when they get the cheese you want in also really helps increase your buying availability. The other main thing that I think is super important is collaborative buying. So buying with other shops and restaurants in your area, which also takes a lot of in-person manpower. Before we opened, I reached out to a bunch of different restaurants in the area, as well as other small retail shops that would potentially sell cheese, and basically was like, hey, I see you're getting cheese from so-and-so. What if I told you I could get you different cheese or better cheese if we worked together to get this product? And what that allowed me to do was build pallets. So a pallet is obviously not a small amount of cheese. We're talking, thousands of dollars of product, which as a young shop is like not an easy get. You can't just be like, I have $4,000 sitting around. Let me just buy a pallet. I had like $200 maybe on a good day in my bank account. So, but what it allowed me to do was create a network of people that would all pick up at my pallet, which lowered their cost for a lot of items also. So some of restaurants in the area were able to order at larger bulk quantities than they could currently get their distributors that they were working with. I could guarantee full wheels of stuff that they could only access quarter wheels of through current distribution platforms. And what that allowed me to do was create the base of my buying on their cheeses. So they needed a half wheel of Pecorino Romano. We're talking 30 pounds of product, that 30 to 40 pounds of product that I wouldn't have been able to go through a full wheel by myself. But if I could sell a half wheel to a restaurant and then a quarter wheel to another restaurant, and now I only have to deal with the 15-pound quarter wheel that I have left, it made it a lot more manageable for all of us. And they were able to buy at quantities that made more sense for them. I also opened up to restaurants to do smaller load quantity purchasing. So in the other direction, if there was a larger wheel that I was interested in getting, so at the time, anything over 15 pounds was really unmanageable for me. I just wasn't pushing through 15 pounds of cheese in a reasonable amount of time. So I would get in something like, let's say, a wheel of Gouda at 30 pounds, and I would reach out to restaurants and be like, hey, I have this Gouda you can't get anywhere else. How about you take 4 pounds? And that was able to offload in a smaller quantity, which a lot of restaurants were really interested in, because a lot of the time they are looking at the same purchasing that we are. So they're looking at 20 to 50 pounds of a product. They're looking at getting a truckle of cheddar. or one of those 40-pound cryovac bags. And honestly, I don't know how it is by you guys, but up here, there's just not restaurants going through 40 pounds of cheddar in a reasonable amount of time before that cheddar is sort of going bad. And so being able to promise smaller quantities on a more frequent basis did allow for better purchasing to the point where I could bring in a better quantity of cheeses and get that kind of interest in the amount of cheeses we were offering so that I could then support it by myself. And then our wholesale just kind of became just desserts for us at this point. It just kind of helps cover the distribution bills. Um, it covers our like hefty delivery fees and all that kind of jazz by being able to sell to other restaurants at a lower distribution price point. Any questions on any of that? I feel like I just threw like a lot of stuff at you guys.
I just have a question about like what kind of margins you're operating off for for the wholesale wing of your business.
Yeah, so for our regular our regular margins on cheese are all at Keystone. And then for the wholesale portion, we're looking at more in that like 20% markup range. So if we're buying something at, let's say 15 a pound, we're doing a 20% markup on that, and then that is what we're selling it to wholesale at. Which I will say was something I had to really discuss and put into it like an email format when discussing with restaurants, because talking to a chef who is a buyer that's used to looking at like, Cisco or whatever major box brand is available in the area, being like, oh, look, it's going to cost you a little bit more, but you'll get X, Y, and Z with it. What I did to make that like slight increase in price worthwhile to restaurants was offer more like hands-on stuff that they could use and utilize with it. So at first we were sending cut guides, like how to cut down like a half wheel of manchego. We were sending like a little spec sheet on it and in email format that was just like, hey, this is this product and this is what makes it special, because it added that like that small increase in labor on our end added a huge increase for them because they were able to put on their menu and be like, this manchego is from this producer and it's one of the only ones made like this, or this cheddar is from here, and it was actually being like cut and prepared correctly, which also helped create a better working relationship with us, because then I was happier to cross promote their business as well, and say like, you can get cheeses available at the Kernerd at this restaurant, which helped us get a little bit more of a foothold and them get a little bit more of a foothold, and all that kind of jazz. Yeah, I see a question.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, Sarah. As soon as you were telling the margin, I had someone come and interrupt me. So if you can just repeat that first where you were at.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Sorry.
I was saying that all of our cheeses in our case, we mark up at Keystone, but our wholesale markup is about 20%.
20%. Okay. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. But yeah, being able to offer like something that's pretty straightforward for most mongers to come up with, like me being able to say like one quick fun fact about a cheese in an email took me a minute to shoot off, but that made such a big difference because most of the time chefs and like restaurants aren't learning any information. I'm sure you've all looked at like a distributor's website. There's no like information on most of the cheeses through most of them. It's just like the name of a cheese and the cost. And so being able to send that really made that extra 20% worthwhile for them, which helped us create a better market. Something else we also did that really helped us create relationships with restaurants and breweries, etc., was work on collaborative classes, which helped us create that relationship with them where they were more interested in buying from us. So we would create an event, a cheese class, a beer and cheese pairing, whatever it was, with that restaurant or with that brewery, with that winery, whatever it was, to create some interest for them, which also helped us create a better brand and them understand that we had a brand following that people were interested in. So by being able to sell tickets through us or through them, they were able to say like, oh, people are interested in what the Curd Nerd is doing, what the Curd Nerd has to say, what's happening there. I think this is a worthwhile investment for us because if people are interested in seeing her do a class, they're probably interested in buying cheese from her as well. Which did really help us also create better like brand awareness. Sometimes it can be hard as a small shop to get any sort of like intrigue in why someone would come to a cut to order counter. And so having those classes where I could go in, talk to like their customers, my customers, sell tickets and be like, they could really understand that what they're paying for at a cut to order shop or at a cheese shop in general is that like knowledge and the expertise behind the counter helped not only us sell more cheese to restaurant, but us create that like interest in people going to restaurants that buy cheese from us, in coming to the shop to buy cheese directly from us, and just in artisan cheese in our area in general. Any questions on any of that? Anyone have any like problems that they're currently trying to work through that I can maybe help problem solve with?
This is not necessarily a specific problem that we're having, but I did want you to mention a little bit, like, how do you get over that psychological sort of hurdle of like, these are my competitors, how do we work together?
So I am like a huge believer in like a rising tide rises all ships. We like can't succeed in small business areas unless we're all succeeding together, which is hard and definitely takes a lot of willpower, because you will definitely talk to a lot of people in business that definitely think of you as a competitor. When we opened, we had this like weird thing where people thought we were competing with the grocery stores. Like Wegmans is a big chain grocer here, and everyone was like, "How are you competing with Wegmans?" And I was like, "I'm not competing. I'm not competing with a multi-billion-dollar company. I could never. I have one employee at that. Like I had me, my husband, who was working for free and still works for free, and we like had one part-time college student when we opened. Like it was crazy that people felt that way. And it really just took a lot of like enthusiasm for what I was doing and excitement about it, and explanation to the customers also, I think. And explanation to other businesses. Like when I would call breweries and discuss it, they'd be like, "Well, you did an event with this brewery." And I'm like, "Okay, but we need to all get excited about artisan beer in the area for the breweries to do well, because if we only have one, that's great, except we don't. We have 32 microbreweries in our area. So if I'm only promoting one of them forever, then what do we want it to only be one forever? Do we only want one option in the marketplace?" And most of them were like, "No, we love working with those guys. Like we buy hops from them sometimes." And I'm like, "Okay, great. So it's the same concept. We're trying to get people excited in all of our businesses together." And I will say the thing that has helped is I think it helped me remember that I was not only trying to sell my product, but I'm also trying to create a brand and brand awareness of a shop and a business. That's like a huge part of business ownership. And so working with restaurants, I was at first I was very interested when we first opened in them putting my name on their menus. And so with that, that helped me kind of feel like we weren't competing, but we were working together. So when we first opened, we were offering a small discount on wholesale. So you could get a 15% markup instead of a 20% markup if you said cheeses were purchased from the Kirknerd on your menu. So if they were doing a cheese and charcuterie plate and they were buying the cheeses from us, if it said cheeses curated by the mongers at the Kirknerd, they got to buy it for 15% markup, which did help. And it also helped me feel a little less like I was selling to the competitors. Now I don't care as much if my name is on a menu, because at this point I have created enough of a brand, which is the ultimate goal. And to the point where most restaurants want to put my name on the menu, not just because it will like help me, but mostly because it helps them sell their cheese if they get to say like, "Oh, and we're buying our cheese from this artisan cheese shop." And that has sort of helped create that like community that we're all kind of working together. I would say community, I think, is like the biggest part of this whole conversation. I think if you're not talking to people, if you're not talking to your distributors, if you're not making connections with your reps if you're not talking to the cheesemakers you really love. We're all kind of missing out on that like connection that is like really vital to the cheese industry. It can feel really isolating being in a like remote cheese area. Like it sounds like most of New Mexico is, like upstate New York can be. It's really hard to not like to feel that like lack of connection. And so creating that community and talking to those people when you can is what really makes it possible to keep going in what we do.
One of the things that is different just by what you're talking about is it sounds like you have more makers like within driving distance of where you are than we do. And I'm wondering if you have any suggestions for a region that has so few makers, like, you know, I mean, we can just drive farther to create those relationships, and, you know, borders are sort of fluid around here anyway. So like going into Colorado or going into Texas is not that big of a deal, but do you have any suggestions on that front? Because I do think that we'd like to make more relationships with at least regional makers if we can't do local makers.
Absolutely, I do. So I am not that far from a handful of makers, but there are a ton near me that don't want people to visit at all anyway. They're just not open for mongers to visit. They're not open for the public to visit, etc. My greatest advice, and I actually worked on a session at conference this year called Makers for Mongers and Mongering for Makers, which is a conversation essentially about this topic, is that finding how your maker is best responding is so necessary. So one of the main touch points that we discussed was that the like retail time of day that we are like working on is not the maker time of day that they're working on. Their day starts 5 to 10, like 6 hours before any of us are even opening our shops or getting into work or doing any of that kind of stuff. So figuring out what timeline your maker is on and where they are best responding is like kind of necessary to build that relationship. So there are some makers that like if you could tell they're active on Instagram and there's someone answering that Instagram, they've got stories up, they're putting information, they're posting on a regular basis, DM them, like DM that maker and be like, hey, this is so and so from this business. I'm really interested in discussing your cheeses. Is there a good time to chat? Is there a good way to chat? How do you prefer that? If you are not finding that they're like active on social media, find their email, find a phone number, call, leave a message, say something along the lines of like, I like want to work with your product. I don't know how. What time works for you to call me back? And that did mean that there were times that I had to take phone calls at times that I would not normally be awake. I have one cheesemaker not far from here called East Hill Creamery. I'm obsessed with their product. They make Alpine style cheeses in upstate New York. They're very few people know about them, and I don't really know why. They have a beautiful state-of-the-art facility. However, they are like 3 hours from me, and it just wasn't realistic to get out there and back. And I sent an email basically being like, hey, what time works for you to call? And he was like, 5:30 in the morning. And I was like, great. I'll be up. And I made a point to like wake up and take his phone call at that time because it's the only time in his day where he's not milking cows or making cheese. It's the like 30 minutes he has to drink his coffee, and he made that time for me. And so the least I could do was make that time for him, which is sort of a give and take on both of our sides because I'm sure he would rather his morning coffee be in silence instead of being pestered by a cheesemonger. And I would prefer to have my eyes closed at 5:30 in the morning and not be awake. That's why my shop doesn't open till 10. But creating that like time frame and understanding that we're all working towards the same goal, but we're all working on different time schedules is really important because it's unfair to ask a maker to call you at 8 p.m. They're probably in bed. Their day started at 4:30 in the morning, like pasteurizing milk. And it's the same difference with like, you know, if they're reaching out and being like, the only time I can ever talk to you is 5 a.m., maybe email is a better way to communicate with that person. But finding whichever that is and however the best way to communicate with them is invaluable, whether you can visit them or not. I suggest creating that, finding that time, finding the best way to contact, figuring out what it means. Like for me, it means that I take texts, emails, DMs, phone calls, whatever works best for that person to contact us, that's how we're contacting with them. And that's how we're creating that community and that relationship.
Would I be able to? I'm raising my hand physically because
Yeah.
we don't know how to do it with Zoom, because we can DM through.
We're in the car and we're not driving.
We can DM through Instagram, but I don't know how to work 99% of the other technologies in the world, aside from our POS. So I just wanted to jump in for a second to ask a couple of questions on a subject you had just talked about prior. I'm Nathan, by the way. Good to meet you.
Hey, Nathan.
Hi. I was wondering, with specifically the wholesale side and dealing with restaurants, because I do think that might be something that Albuquerque is a good spot for. There are some chefs who are doing something cool and don't have a lot of access to stuff, just like we are. So I wanted to ask on that two things. With those restaurants, when you were starting to build that wholesale catalog of yours, or like that your Rolodex, did you approach the restaurants, or were the restaurants coming to you?
I approached the restaurant. So I actually started approaching restaurants before we even opened, just kind of to get a feel for like the interest in
Mhm.
what it would look like to offer artisan cheese to them. And with that, I sent out a like pretty concise email about like what our business model looked like, with the understanding that we were looking to have rotational cheeses. And so we were willing to bring them in stock items if they wanted to, but if they also wanted us to curate it, they could get access to our like rotating catalog.
Okay.
Now what we do is we have a like Excel document that we use through Google Sheets that we have restaurants on, and we kind of just go in weekly, and I'll like make it, I have it like all color coded. So it's like red means that it's out of stock, like yellow means that they could pre-order it from me, and green means we currently have it in stock, with some like general ideas of like how much quantity we have, so that there's not like, oh, I need 3 wheels of this blue by tomorrow. And then I'm like, that's so great. I don't stock wheels of that one blue.
Yeah.
Like we had a restaurant call us and be like, I need a wheel of parm. And I was like, great, for when? And they were like, tomorrow. And I'm like, yeah, like that's so great for you. But like, I actually just don't keep an extra wheel of parm stocked, because that actually costs more than my mortgage payment. If you needed one for next week, like I could make one happen for you and like get
Yeah.
that to
Yeah, cool. And that was kind of that next question. That's a good lead into that, because so setting up boundaries with those restaurants or those wholesale clients that you have, one of the biggest ones, because we run into this here already. It's a small city, but it's big enough to where it's a very driver city. Everyone wants things delivered, or a lot of Uber Eats and DoorDash and drive-throughs and all that kind of stuff. So are people coming to these wholesale accounts? Are they coming to your shop to pick up their orders, or are you ever doing delivery for them? Or
So we do a mix. We have chefs that want to come in every week and they want to like taste with us, talk to the monger behind the counter, buy their cheese on site, which I love. And there's no additional fees for that. We do have some wholesale accounts that are delivery based, and we set up delivery fee parameters. So like if you're within 5 miles of the shop, the delivery fee is $5. If you're within 10 miles of the shop, it's $10, etc. Helped set that boundary of like, if you want, look, we're willing to deliver, but you're going to have to pay for that, because I can't just take time out of my day. I also set really strict rules on timing for deliveries. So I like, we had this thing at first where we had like coffee shops that were like, I want my delivery at 4 o'clock in the morning, because that like we open at 5. And I'm like, that's so great. How about you get it 4 p.m. the day before, like when we have the time, because like I can't make that happen. And we honestly, we were very lucky in the sense that if you talk to people, they're more than willing to usually work with you on it. They have an idea of how they want it to work. We actually now have a couple breweries that we deliver to, and they just gave us their like back entrance pin. So we can like go in, put the pin in, put the stuff in the walk-in and head out, because they don't open until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which is not useful for us, because we need to be making that delivery in the morning, because I don't have the fridge space to hold it. So as soon as it comes in, I need it to go to the door.
Sure.
And I said that to them, and I was just really honest. I was like, look, we're working on, I literally have very finite amount of fridge space. Your order needs to leave my shop as soon as it gets in. And she was like, okay, great. Why don't you just key yourself into the building?
Oh,
But I will say
okay.
honesty is
Oh,
like very
yeah,
helpful.
yeah,
And I'm trying to make it look like you can do everything as a small business. Being honest and upfront of like, hey, look, like some weeks this isn't gonna work. Like, you know, I could tell you we could stock this cheese for you as best I can, but it's
sometimes it's not going to. Yeah,
yeah, sometimes it's just not going to be humanly possible.
yeah,
Like, you know, there are weeks where the most basic cheese that I order all the time is all of a sudden out of stock. And I'm
yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh, great.
yeah.
Um, and so
Okay, cool.
when we were creating those relationships, I was just really honest about like cheese is not something that is stable. It is not like ordering whatever, like it's not like ordering neutral oil from whatever Cisco account you're using.
Yeah,
There's not always like we don't always have that stocked. And I talked a lot to chefs about seasonality, which also helped create that relationship where they wanted to come in and talk to the mongers. Because if I was being honest about like what the difficulties we were having were, they were like, oh, well, now I'm interested in hearing about like why I should carry fresh goat cheese in May. And I'm like, yeah, great, because like that's like a great time for fresh goat cheese. And like it like I have all these fresh guys and whatever. And they like were a
yeah,
little bit more interested to come in, which also helped us.
yeah,
Stocked a little.
yeah, yeah. Cool. Great. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions right now?
Yeah, I have a question. This is Matthew from Picnic Cheese in Santa Fe. Um, when you were, obviously it would be state to state differences, but when you were looking into licensing for your business to start, did that include any sort of wholesaling status to do what you're doing now?
Yeah, so we have like a weird New York State licensing thing. So I actually am under the state licensing and not like local licensing, which took a lot of work for me to figure out, which I'm sure all of you that started shops also get how difficult it is to figure out like local codes and all that kind of jazz. It's not fun anywhere to my understanding. But when we were looking into our licensing, I had a call with the state agri markets department to double check that small scale wholesale was not going to impede our licensing in any way, just to double check on that. Because if wholesale becomes like, for us, I think it was more than 25% of our business, then we had to apply for a separate licensing. Thankfully, it sort of like ranges in that like 10 to 15% for us, which helps keep us afloat, but without like pays the bills, but doesn't interfere with our current licensing. The thing that I will say that does impact like generally all around the country is wholesaling of charcuterie, because that does involve the USDA. So if you were to like wholesale cheese boards to someone, it has to have less than 3% by weight charcuterie on it. Otherwise, the USDA has to inspect your location.
Yeah,
That's
we've
cut
been
by.
through that conversation with that's happened in Santa Fe already with I'm not sure who, but it like yeah, where people get accounts at a bar or you know, to have charcuterie boards available for their customers, which we consistently get requests for and have actually looked into the USDA inspection just simply because at some point it may become beneficial for us to do so. But
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
seems like the want for or the need for a meatless, you know, board is just like people aren't interested, even though especially at this like the height of the year, it could be thrilling without meat.
Yeah, that's actually fascinating. I feel like we have the opposite here. When I mentioned the issue with the USDA to a lot of our contracts, they were very interested in how they could like still get cheese boards from us regardless. And I was like, you could get cheese boards from us if they don't have meat or if they have like very little charcuterie on there. It also helped if I explained like the lifespan of a pre-made charcuterie box. So we do like pre-made boxes with all that kind of all the jazz in them, all the little nuts and all that jazz. And I had explained that they have a much better like 5-day shelf life without meat in them, and that they have a much shorter shelf life with meat in them.
Yeah,
And
especially if in the well-lit case or something like that, you know.
yeah, exactly. Especially if they, and also like for us, a lot of the times they were like being put in like wherever they were keeping like beer cold, which is like very cold storage. And I was like, it's like too cold for cheese and all that kind of jazz. And so having that conversation also really helped because we have a minimum for our like cheese boxes. And so I was like, sure, you can have us do like we'll do up to 3% meat in them to not have to go through USDA inspection. But you will want to buy boards every 3 days instead of every, once a week. And they were like, oh, I can meet the minimum once a week though. And I'm like, okay, great. Then it looks like we're doing meatless. Or you can only have them on the weekends if you want the meat on them. And having those like really honest conversations about like what shelf life looks like helped also, because I think in like the restaurant mindset and the brewery mindset and the bar mindset, they're like, they know it's fine, everything's cool. Like, we all feel that way. I eat more expired food product than I eat non-expired food product. But like
Yeah,
that's because I work in food. But I also know like you can't sell expired food product. And that's not always something that I think like that brewery bar vibe is aware of, if especially if they don't do food in-house themselves.
yeah.
And so making that clear, we put like expiration dates on all the boxes. We do have like we will ding your account if we find out that you sold an expired box. And you get one warning, and then if we find out you sell a second expired box, we will terminate your wholesale account. Which feels pretty harsh, but also like I will not.
No, it's not.
Yeah, I was like, I will not, I don't want a lawsuit for me getting someone sick because you thought it was cool to sell like 3-week-old 2 piece, like for the 2 slices of salami. I would rather take the loss on it. I'd almost rather them credit them. I'd almost rather credit back boxes that don't sell than have someone get sick on a product that I did sell them.
Yeah, understood. Yeah, and in New Mexico, at least that aspect of it, lack of like the wholesaling, there are ways in both Albuquerque and Santa Fe to slip under the radar. Not necessarily, but kind of technically, but under a catering license that is 100% allowed. Maybe not in Albuquerque. I'm not sure. The laws seem to be just like that much difference in Santa Fe, but Santa Fe, you can do it.
Yeah.
We've been told directly by the environmental department the same things that you have just let us know, but the 3% meat, but the vegetarian boards we could sell to a bar at a lesser cost and have them retail out. The only time the FDA gets involved is if we put on that above the 3% meat, which generally is really not much anyway.
Yeah, honestly, most of the
Especially
time,
for the price points bars are looking for,
yeah, most of the time, like we have a couple contracts that still want the meat in it, and I'm like, it's great. You wouldn't want more than 3% anyway. It's like the 3 slices of charcuterie is
Right.
enough. You know what I mean? 3 slices of salami for the size board you're getting is the like correct portioning, most of the time, and so it does sort of work out pretty well generally. We also did have less of an issue selling like wholesaling prepackaged charcuterie. So if a bar wanted to come in and purchase like whole sticks of something, like that's great, buy all you want. I don't care what you do with it. It was the issue of like us pre-slicing it and getting it to them, which is what the USDA has issues with. As long as we have like the tracking and availability of like, hey, this like full stick came in on this day. We have all the information about it. We sold it on this day. They don't mind. And so we have a couple bars and breweries in the area that started buying like those pre-sealed, like pre-sliced prosciutto packs from us. And they just sell those as is, and that works for the brewery vibe around here anyway, and helped us not worry about putting meat in their boxes.
That could side by side in the right space or with the right like table 10 or chalkboard or something along those lines. That could work. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
it
good
it
way
like
around it. I hadn't thought of the separation of the two. But
Yeah, we also like used a lot of like smaller format charcuterie, which Underground Meats I will say is excellent for this. They make like really tiny saucisson sex sticks and stuff like that. And so we were able to just be like, look, we placed our order. It helped us create a larger order from them because we wholesale direct from them, so they have to ship it to us. And so I would buy, 3 cases instead of 2 because I was selling a whole case to a brewery because they could sell those sticks, and they're a little bit easier for breweries and things to go through also because they are oftentimes shelf stable. So that is you do need to like do a little bit of explanation that they need to have some sort of like knives available or like something available for people to
Right.
like access it. But if they're willing to make that difference, they still have access to the charcuterie without you getting into the like pre-sliced bothering getting the USDA involved.
Yeah, and I think that the shelf life and the minimum commitment to each order is kind of like you had said, like leans people towards, the alternative idea being the vegetarian or the separation of the two. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
I'm going to use that in an email after the call.
Oh, please do. It does help. And also like a
Yeah,
lot of
with
the
someone
times
who's been inquiring for a while, so.
it helps bars and breweries also because a lot of the times those items, the like pre-sliced and small format charcuterie have better shelf lives for them. So
Yeah.
they don't have to order every week. They could place one order that they can then sell over the course of a while.
Right. All right then. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other pressing current questions? Well, it sounds like I need to make a trip to New Mexico and do like a whole New Mexico cheese tour. Sounds like it will be a lot of driving. But
You
there
get to
were
drive really fast.
oh then that's a pretty good strike. The only time my husband, his full-time gig is in engineering, and so he is often sent to New Mexico, but literally to the desert, never to do anything fun. They like stop at a Target before they drive into the desert, and then they like leave him there for a week. And that's about the closest we get.
It's really hot down here in Las Cruces now, so you might want to wait a few months.
That sounds about right. I'm deeply an upstate New York person now. I need it to be cold at all times. David saw me in Italy when it was very, very hot and I was dying every day. It's all I wanted to talk about was how hot it was. So
Just wait
that
till October in Las Cruces. October is great down there.
Even November.
Yeah. I have to get your the name and the name of the gentleman's shop who is driving and just listening, because I am going to be down in Las Cruces in October, and would like to visit his shop at least and see where you're at.
Awesome. Yeah, I don't, Jeremiah, are you on?
Yeah.
I think he is on, but
Yeah.
it's the.
I'm here.
Oh,
What's
okay.
the name of your place again?
New Mexico Marketplace and Bakery. And I also go by Proof Bread Co.
I'm so excited to have cheese across the state and see, connecting with the two of you as an amazing opportunity for the New Mexico Cheese Guild, just because we don't have a lot of members that are from the southern part of the state, even though that's where most of the big industrial dairy is happening in our state. So it's a pleasure that you guys made it. And I hope that we can continue to develop the relationships, and hopefully there's people more than just you in Las Cruces for group purchasing and other collaboration and community. I do know that breweries are like hopping across the state. So we should all have tons of breweries to be able to work with. That could be like a whole other business in itself, supporting these breweries. So I'm keeping an eye on the clock. I think we only have about 5 minutes until we get to the hour. Is there anything else, Sarah, that you feel like we need to know? And then I'd also want to touch base with Tina, because I know, Tina, you are sort of supporting folks who are not quite at the, like they don't have a brick and mortar yet. But I just wanted to create space for you if you had any specific questions that maybe are tailored to that stage that what you're interested in.
I mean, not anything specific. I think it's more of just trying to like understand, especially kind of that collaborative purchasing. We work with such small producers, such small food entrepreneurs, that kind of collaborative purchasing, not just in the cheese arena, but in, all of the kind of purchasing is really key for them to be able to, to kind of get great product and be able to kind of afford it at the same time. So I think that's kind of where I'm really interested in that piece of it.
Sarah, do you have any just nuts and bolts advice on that? Like shared Google spreadsheets or meeting face to face, or, I don't know.
So I always suggest meeting face to face to start. There's like nothing better than like actually having a conversation with someone. If it's not possible, talking to another human is really invaluable. It's way easier to be like, yeah, I could buy that on if you're like on email, but then like you can't actually take that on. I will say for group purchasing, I will often, if there's something that I think I can purchase in bulk that I will make like better profitability on, I will reach out to contacts that I think would be interested in that kind of product to buy some in quantity with me when I first started. So when I was looking at like bulk nuts and things like that, I reached out to some other like specialty stores in my area just to be like, hey, do you guys carry this product? Like if we went in together and bought this much, you could carry some, I could carry some, we could all have some without me buying 50 pounds of candied pecans by myself, or whatever it was. And really just like create, like I said, it's really just about creating relationships between people, and figuring out where the like product that makes the most sense for you is, and like how to purchase it and who is using something similar or might be interested in buying it together. I am gonna throw all of my contact in the chat for everyone. If you guys want it, that's my cell, my email, my business, all that kind of jazz. Please feel free to reach out. I am always happy to talk to people who are trying to make this work, and answer any questions anyone has. And hopefully we can all have great, cool shops, businesses, etc. Together.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if we might want to all put in some like contact information and maybe write like a sentence or two of like a goal we want to work on that could be aided in with collaboration. I know our shop definitely has a few. Having worked in different cheese shops in different states, I found the more people are talking to each other and working with each other in cheese, the better for consumers and for the businesses. More good stuff becomes available. The supply chain becomes more robust. You can get things at price points that match the market more easily, rather than like crazy insane things that nobody would ever splurge on. And I'm really excited for us to head in that direction. And yeah, so if you guys want to post contact info and like if you have a goal, I think that would be excellent, because I would love to reach out to all of you, I think.
I was going to say the thing that I think the New Mexico Cheese Guild can do is maybe some of the coordination, and if we do all want to meet, I can send out doodle polls and help us find the right time and a location that works for everyone, and just do some of that support, because I know we're all super busy. We don't have a brick and mortar yet, but we really see our role as supporting every aspect of the cheese community in the state of New Mexico. So I'm so grateful that Sarah came in today, so that I know sometimes we might seem like we're focused so much on makers that we are neglecting our retailers. And I'm excited to have this particular, workshop, training, whatever we want to call it, as evidence that we're not trying to just focus solely on makers. We need everybody. So I did put my information in there. And like I said, if you want us to help coordinate, we're happy to do that. If not, we don't need to either. Like it's, if you guys have an idea, just let us know about it and we'll promote it. Okay, it's 3 o'clock. Has everyone had a chance to drop their stuff in there? I'll try to take some pictures of it to share with the recording. And feel free to forward the recording and the, the email about what we've discussed today with everyone's contact information to anyone else you think that might be interested in getting involved. Sorry, my internet's been so weird. I'm getting notifications on my phone that my system has run out of application memory. I don't even know what that means, but it probably means I need a new laptop. But I appreciate everyone sort of rolling with the technical difficulties a little bit. And yeah, I think this was a really great place to start. I know I personally, because of my background and lack of it, learned like at least 4 or 5 things that I hadn't even conceived of before just from this conversation. So super excited to see what comes of it. I hope we continue to build on this. Any other last thoughts from anyone else?
I want to thank you so much for inviting us, and it was a pleasure meeting you, Sarah. And
Thank you. I want to say thank you everyone for listening to me. Sometimes I forget that I actually have some knowledge that I can share. It can definitely feel isolating in the cheese industry.
Thanks Thank for your you. knowledge.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it all.
All right. Well, thank